Hello, this is Miss Dagenford, and I wanted to make this video to help you review our plant unit. And this video particularly concerns the vascular tissue, the xylem and phloem of the plants. And these tissues are transport vessels. The xylem is dead at maturity, and it is the vessel that transports water and minerals such as nitrates, potassium, magnesium, calcium. These are things that you would find in your typical fertilizer. Now, the way that water and the minerals are transported depend upon two concepts. One is called transpiration, and then the other is cohesion. And this ends up the title of the model, transpiration cohesion model. Now, the transpiration is simply another word for evaporation, but this is specific to water evaporating from the leaves of the tree. And so it could evaporate all over from whatever leaf is exposed to the air, of course. And here's a picture that's blown up for us, enlarged for us, and you can see that the water is evaporating through the stoma. And as the water is evaporating, there are water molecules underneath it, below it, in the areas underneath in the xylem. Now, the cohesion, where cohesion comes in, is that the water molecules have hydrogen bonds. And those hydrogen bonds exist because water is polar. And if you need a quick refresher, if we have our water molecule here, oxygen has a partial negative and hydrogen has a partial positive. And so each water molecule has these hydrogen bonds between them. So that means whenever one molecule evaporates, there are other water molecules that are getting pulled from below. And then, of course, if you magnify how many xylem tubes there are, then all of these tubes have this tension in them, and that's the cohesion, that's due to the cohesion between the water molecules. So between the transpiration of water out of the leaves and then the cohesion of the water molecules from below, you have the pull of the water up the column of the tree or plant, and it's those stoma that are involved in that. Now, the only time that the plant has to expend any energy is down at the root cells. The root cells, they actively transport the ions. Think of potassium. If they actively transport the potassium inside, then that means that there is a lower concentration of water inside. So water diffuses in. So they can expend energy down at the roots, but everything else is completely passive. The water is pulling that up from below just through that power of evaporation and cohesion. And it's quite effective. It can be quite fast for the tree. Now, translocating sugars is a little bit more complicated. We call this translocation, and that's done through the phloem. And the phloem cells are alive, but usually they're so specialized they need companion cells to help out their metabolism. So what we call this transfer is source to sink. Now, there's a couple of examples just to get you thinking about how sugars can move. The one example we talked about in class, early spring, is where the source would be the roots of the tree or plant, and then what the plant is going to do is move those sugars to the parts of the tree that need that energy. So, for instance, this could be to make newly developed leaves. This could be to make flowers, to grow stems. But we need the energy that was stored over winter. So all of these are potential sinks for that sugar. Of course, any time else during the year, once those leaves are made, the source would be the leaves. And then the sink is going to be usually down to the root to store that material. So there's our couple of examples of source sink. Now, how do plants do that? Well, active transport is going to be involved here. So let's say this is our phloem, And this is the model, so this is not the best drawing, but so this is our tubes, our phloem pipeline, and we'd have our leaf. Now, if I blew up one of those cells in the leaf, then what the plant does is it takes the sugars in the leaf and actively transports them into the phloem cells. Now, that active transport builds up a high concentration of sugars, a low concentration of water. Now, the xylems are right next to the phloem cells, and they're carrying water up, but that doesn't mean that water can't move over here as well. And so you're going to have water flowing into the phloem. This is going to create a high pressure system. Think about like filling a water balloon with water. Now down at the roots, so you've got your root system here. So again, here's our actual picture, but if I were to take a cell from the root, the system, it works just down here as well. You're going to actively transport sugars out of the phloem into the root cells, and this is going to create then a low pressure as water leaves. So down here, this is a low pressure, and we know that fluids and gases, well, they're going to move from high pressure to low pressure. And so it's going to push. So this is now a push or a force to move the sugars, whereas up here, this was a tension, a pulling, like a rubber band up here in the transpiration. So down here, we're going to move the sugars by just almost flushing them, if you will, and transporting them from place to place by manipulating where they are, and then letting the water do the work. So, just to kind of sum up, here's our transpiration, dead cells that are moving water and minerals. And the water is the conduit. We're allowing transpiration to happen. That's the evaporation of water. And because of the cohesion of water, the water molecules are attracted to each other and they get pulled up. And then the minerals are there as well. Down here, and that was a tension or a pulling, kind of like a rubber band. On a hot day, you can actually measure the tree actually getting pulled in just ever so slightly as the water molecules pull on the tree trunk as well, because they're evaporating so fast. And then down here, we're translocating sugars through the phloem tubes, which are alive, and we call this source to sink, roots to leaves. And that's going to occur because of active transport of the sugars that were made. So, hope this helps, gives you a little bit more of a review.